10월 17일 예비선거 기호 45번 일리노이주 하원의원 호안후윈 후보를 모시고 이야기 나눠보겠습니다. 반갑습니다. 안녕하세요.
Yeah. 안녕하세요. I am State Representative 하원의원. I represent right now the 13th State House District. This is the north side lakefront of the city of Chicago, and I'm also now running for the United States Congress as well in this cycle, and the election is on March 17, 2026.
저희 시청자분들께 인사 부탁드릴게요. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I am State Representative Hoan-Nguyen. I am Vietnamese American. I'm also the first Vietnamese American ever elected in Illinois' history of 208 years when I was first elected in 2022. The Vietnamese American community is a fast-growing community in Chicago. There's about 30,000 of us in the Chicagoland area, and we are really working together to make sure that we are fighting for our communities, fighting for all Asian American communities, fighting for our Korean American communities, Chinese American communities, and other communities as well. But it's been very important for me to represent our communities of color, and particularly our Asian American communities in Illinois, and hopefully across this country as well.
일리노이에 얼마나 많은 베트남 커뮤니티 사람들이 있는지 궁금합니다.
So there's about 30,000 of us right now in Illinois. A lot of the Vietnamese Americans live in the 9th Congressional District, the district in which I am running in. So folks live around Chicago, North Side, Lakefront, and then they also live in suburbs like Skokie, Niles, Lincolnwood, Buffalo Grove, Morton Grove, Glenview as well. And certainly I think that's also been representative of the fastest growing community as well, the Asian American community, of which we are the fastest growing in the country. We are the fastest growing in Chicagoland and the fastest growing in the state. So Asian Americans right now, as a whole, are the fastest growing community across this country.
일리노이 제9지구 민주당 선거구에서 연방 하원의원 선거에 출마하기로 결심하게 된 계기는 무엇인가요?
I think about my whole life right now. I think right now we are in a moment of crisis. I think back about my own family's background. My family and I were refugees from the Vietnam War. My grandparents died in Vietnam fighting for democracy, freedom, and human rights during the Vietnam War. My dad was a prisoner of war during the war for 5 years when he was captured and tortured by enemy forces. My mom's village was burned down during the war. My mom's dad was killed during the war. My mom and her mother were homeless during the Vietnam War. So after the war ended, we were left behind. We lived under the new Vietnamese regime, the new communist regime, for a very long time, for close to 18 years of our lives before we were finally granted political asylum to come to the United States. So I was born in Vietnam, in South Vietnam, and we lived in fear. We lived in fear of a new government, a new authoritarian government, a new secret police that kidnapped people every single night and tried to kill us. And so thankfully we were able to be saved by the United States. And when we first came over to the United States, it was very tough. It was 8 of us in a 1-bedroom apartment. My mom worked in a factory for 14 hours a day with an 8th grade education. She made $5 an hour. My dad had PTSD from the war. But this country gave me a chance. This country gave me a fair shot at the American dream. So I was able to go to our public schools, K-12, from kindergarten to 12th grade. And then I was able to get a scholarship and student loans to go to Yale University for college, where I went there for college and graduated with honors. And then I went on to get my master's in management and policy at Harvard University, where I also graduated with honors as well. And then I came back to Chicago to make sure that everyone in this country gets a fair shot at the American dream, the same one that I had grown up. And so I think right now we are at that inflection point where we need to make sure that every one of us, our kids, our grandkids, everyone right now who's living, gets a fair shot at the American dream, whether that is jobs, education, housing, healthcare. We need to make sure that folks have access to those opportunities. And that's why I'm running for the United States Congress right now, is to make sure that we fight for those opportunities, to make sure we bring down the cost of living, because the cost of living has become way too expensive right now, whether that is housing costs, property taxes, healthcare costs, grocery costs, utility costs. We have to also protect Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And we have to fight for democracy, fundamental human rights, whether that's voting rights, women's rights, immigrant rights, refugee rights. But I think right now this country is going in the wrong direction, and we need to make sure that we move it to the right path. And we also need to make sure we build this country forward for our kids and for our grandkids as well.
한인 유권자들을 위해 본인의 정치 인생과 현재 지역구에서 가장 중요하게 생각하는 가치가 무엇인지 말씀 부탁드립니다.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I did not come from politics. When I first started work almost more than a decade ago, I worked in finance and in community investments. I led investment projects of over $100 million across the Chicagoland area, whether that was looking at affordable housing or senior health care, or also investing in communities of color, particularly investing in Asian American communities. And I think what's really important to me was when we saw during the pandemic, during COVID-19 in 2020, we saw the overt racism and xenophobia in this country as it affects Korean Americans, Vietnamese Americans, Chinese Americans, Asian Americans. And I think what really motivated me to run the first time in 2022 for state representative was I saw the ways in which Asian Americans were left behind during COVID-19. We heard that COVID-19 was called the Kung Flu virus. We heard from numerous people in our communities that there was racism being committed against Korean Americans. And we saw that happen when we saw the shootings happen in Atlanta, in the Korean spas that we saw where Korean American women who were just going to work were being gunned down in broad daylight. And I think that paints to a broader picture of the hate crimes that we have seen Korean Americans experience across this country, and certainly in Illinois as well. And so I think for me, it's particularly very important that we fight to make sure that we support our Korean American community, that there is a voice for our Korean American community. And I've been at the forefront of making sure that we fight to support our Korean American small businesses, that we support our Korean American kids and our Korean American young people, and that we support our Korean American seniors as well. And so for me, it's very important that we support our Asian American community as a whole. But in particular, I think what really brought me to politics was making sure that we are represented, that we have an actual voice in politics, and that we actually, when we get there, we fight for all the things that we care about, whether that is fighting for our young people when it comes to education, fighting for our Korean American seniors when it comes to healthcare and Social Security, and fighting for our Korean American community when it comes to fighting for resources that we can bring back to our district. And so I've been very vocal about that and been very active and at the forefront of fighting for those issues for the Korean American community and making sure that, again, we have a voice in government.
이번 선거에 출마하신 가장 큰 이유는 무엇이며 선거에 성공한다면 가장 먼저 추진하고 싶은 핵심 정책은 무엇입니까?
We have talked to thousands of people across this congressional district for the last 8 months. I have traveled from Chicago all the way up to Wheeling, all the way up to Algonquin, Crystal Lake, and Buffalo Grove, Morton Grove, Glenview. And so we've been to numerous suburbs in this district, and we've heard a lot of the same things from our neighbors. We've talked to thousands of people, and what we've been hearing on the doors and certainly at events has just really been the cost of living has gone way up. It's becoming way more expensive, whether that is housing costs, property taxes, grocery costs, utility costs, healthcare costs, education costs, and people need real economic relief. So my top priority in this election is to make sure we bring down the cost of living. We have to make sure we bring those costs down. I have a solution to bring those costs down, and we could talk more about that in this interview as well. But I think certainly we need to make sure that we are able to support our working families and our middle-class families. People right now are being squeezed by higher taxes. And they're not getting much for these higher taxes as well. In addition to that, these prices have gone way up. And families are finding it very unaffordable right now. So I think my top priority in this cycle is to bring down the cost of living. It is also to make sure that we bring down the cost of health care as well. It's to protect Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, of which we have all paid into the system. And it's going to go insolvent by 2035 unless we do something drastic about that now. And I think the last thing is we have to fight for democracy and fundamental human rights. So those are the three top issues in which we've been focused on, but we've been hearing this from our neighbors and from thousands of people across this congressional district right now.
난민 출신으로서의 경험이 공공서비스 및 리더십에 대한 후보님의 접근 방식에 어떤 영향을 미쳤습니까?
I am the only immigrant in this race right now. I think particularly as someone who is a refugee who came to this country looking for opportunity as well. My family and I, we were very scared and we lived in fear when we were living in Vietnam. We were on the chopping block to be killed by the secret police. So this country, the United States, gave us hope. And when we first came over here, we had no money, no connections, no jobs, no housing. We did not speak English at all. I learned English as a second language. And I think it's particularly very important to our communities that we have someone that represent us. And so I think for me, it was really a hope, and it was really the American dream that kept us going. And this country gave us opportunities to be successful, whether that was economic opportunity or housing opportunity or educational opportunity. But I can say this, nowhere but the United States of America can a refugee kid from Vietnam come over here at 4 years old, start from scratch, have nothing, live with a family of 8 in a 1-bedroom apartment, and be able to have the opportunities that I had, be able to go to our public schools, K-12, be able to go to Yale and Harvard, and come back to Chicago and work in community investments and finance, and then be able to run for state representative and win, and then also be able to run for United States Congress. So I think that those opportunities can't just be for me and my family, it has to be for all of us, for our families, for Korean Americans across this state and across the country, for our Asian American communities, for our kids and for our grandkids. And that's something that's very important to me, is to make sure that no matter where you come from, no matter your zip code, you get a fair shot in this country at the American dream. And that's what we're running to do, is to restore that American dream for all of us.
선거운동의 핵심 주제로 생활비 인하를 내세우셨는데요. 구체적으로 어떤 해결책이 가장 큰 효과를 가져올 것이라고 생각하십니까?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we need to lower the cost of living across this district, certainly across Illinois and then across the state. What I have proposed is making sure that right now we've seen the gap between the rich and the middle class and the poor get even bigger. And so we have seen instances where multi-billion-dollar hedge funds right now are making record profits in this economy. Every year in Illinois alone, they make over $900 trillion in financial transactions. What my solution is proposing is if we take one-fifth of 1 penny, one-fifth of 1 penny on every financial transaction that has taken place in Illinois, we can find over $20 billion extra just for Illinois alone. And that $20 billion extra allows for us to then use it to earmark it in the budget to reduce the cost of living. So that's rolling back property taxes increase, lowering your property taxes, lowering your housing costs, lowering your utility costs, and lowering your healthcare costs. But we can use that extra money, the $20 billion extra just in Illinois alone, to reduce those costs. I think the other thing we have to do is also make sure that we can roll this out across the country as well. So when we look at this across the country, we're able to find $800 billion extra, $800 billion extra over the course of 10 years. And so that allows for us to also protect Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security to make sure that that is going to be solvent and that is going to be there for our seniors, for our Korean American seniors, for our Asian American seniors, and for all of us, right? And for our kids and for our grandkids. But I think that is a proposal that I propose on the campaign trail and something that I am very adamant about pushing for once I get to Washington, D.C.
억만장자 헤지펀드 수수료 법안에 대해 간략하게 설명해 주시고 이 법안이 공정하고 효과적이라고 생각하는 이유도 말씀 부탁드립니다.
Yeah, so again, when we look at the billionaire hedge fund fee, we've seen that these hedge funds across the state make $900 trillion a year in transactions, in financial transactions. Right now, they pay 0%. So every time when they make a transaction, they pay nothing. But in essence, they're using our data centers, they're using our infrastructure, they're using our resources. They pay $0 right now in terms of those fees. What I am proposing is 1/5 of 1 penny. And just think about that. 1/5 of 1 penny. That's not even a penny. That's literally 20% of a penny, right? 1/5 of 1 penny. So we take just 1/5 of 1 penny, we can find $20 billion extra alone in the budget, and that allows for us to bring down the cost of living. And so it's very important for us to do that. And I think if you look again as a whole, 1/5 of 1 penny generates $2,000 for every $1 million, right? So if you think again in the grand scheme of things, $2,000 in $1 million is a drop in the bucket for hedge fund companies that are making trillions of dollars a year in transactions, and they're making billions of dollars a year in profits. So we're asking them to pay their fair share as well. As of right now, they're paying zero. We're asking them to pay their fair share. That allows for us to find $20 billion extra, and that allows for us to then reduce the cost of property taxes, reduce the cost of housing, reduce the cost of healthcare. And if we then put this across the country, we could find $800 billion extra. $800 billion extra allows for us to also reduce your cost of healthcare, reduce your cost of housing, your property taxes, also protect Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. I think another thing that we need to explore is also making sure that we protect Social Security by removing the cap. The cap right now is $185,000 a year. So you and I pay 6.2%, and viewers watching at home usually pay 6.2% of $185,000 a year. Whereas you have multi-billionaires, or even the first trillionaire, like Elon Musk, for example, he only pays 6.2% of $185,000. So he pays up to the $185,000, and that's 6.2% of $185,000 is about $12,000 a year. So Elon Musk pays $12,000 a year in Social Security taxes. You and I pay about $12,000 a year in Social Security taxes. That's not fair. Yeah. You know, why is it that a guy like Elon Musk, a multi-billionaire, and who is going to be the first trillionaire globally, is only paying $12,000 a year in Social Security taxes? So we need to make sure we lift that cap, and if we lift the cap of 185, that means Elon Musk will pay 6.2% of his actual income for the year. That allows for the system to be much more fair, it allows for the system to be much more just, and it allows for us to make sure that Social Security can actually survive. And if we do that, instead of Social Security being insolvent and going away by 2035, where we won't have any more money by 2035 to pay out in Social Security benefits, we will have Social Security for the next 100 years, the next 200 years. But we need to really plan for that right now and make sure we take drastic measures and also have these solutions to address right now the deficit in Social Security.
일리노이 제9선거구 가족들의 의료 접근성을 확대하기 위해 가장 시급하게 필요한 연방 차원의 조치는 무엇이라고 생각합니까?
Yeah, so right across this 9th Congressional District, a lot of our families, particularly our Korean American families, rely on healthcare access from the U.S. government. Either they rely on Medicare when they're seniors, and they're hoping to have that when they retire, or a lot of our families rely on Medicaid, of which when you're low income, you get Medicaid coverage from the state and from the feds. And so for us, we need to make sure that coverage is available for all of us. Medicaid right now is basically being cut from the federal government right now. About 39,000 families in Illinois rely on Medicaid. So we really need to make sure that that coverage is accessible, is available. And what I am proposing is making sure that we protect that coverage. We need to make sure that we expand the Affordable Care Act tax credits, the subsidies, that allows for us to reduce the premiums. We need to also make sure that we provide more resources into the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal government to make sure that we have money, resources for Medicare and Medicaid. And I think we also need to expand coverage as well. So we know, again, 39,000 families alone in the 9th Congressional District need access to health insurance. They rely on Medicaid and Medicare. That needs to be expanded. We need to expand Medicare coverage across the country and across the state. That means that we need to expand not just coverage for healthcare, but for dental, for vision, for any preventive care as well. I think that needs to be explored. I think we also need to make sure that we lowered the cost of prescription drugs. And right now we have a problem in our country where prescription drugs and big pharma, the big pharmacy companies, are basically monopolizing the markets. And so we need to end their pay to delay scam. And I have a solution to do that. What pay to delay means is right now, big pharmaceutical companies, they pay smaller companies money. So these small companies keep their generics off of our shelves. And by them doing so, that actually allows for big pharma to bring up the cost of prescription drugs when they're selling these drugs to us at Walgreens, at CVS, at your local pharmacies. So what my plan is and what my solution is we need to end that pay to delay scam. That means that big pharma cannot pay their competition money so that their competition can keep these drugs off the shelf, right? So if we end that scam, it allows for more competition in the marketplace, right? It allows for smaller drug companies to compete with bigger drug companies. So it allows for these smaller drug companies to actually put their drugs on the shelf. And in turn, it allows for us to bring down the cost of drugs across our state and across this country. But we need to make sure that we also address that healthcare issue as well when it comes to drug prices and making sure that drug prices are much more affordable in this country as well for our seniors and for our communities of color.
어떻게 하면 공교육을 강화하고 학교 내 모든 학생들에게 동등한 기회를 보장할 수 있을까요?
I went to public school, K-12. I'm a public education student my entire life. I went to school K-12 and I even learned English as a second language from K-12 public schools, from teachers who took time to teach me. I think right now what we're seeing at the federal government, again, is the dismantling of the Department of Education. Or we're seeing resources that are being cut from the Department of Education. These resources are going to have ripple effects across our district, across our communities of color, across our Korean American community. I think we need to make sure that when we come back in these midterms, that we actually fight to provide more resources in the Department of Education. We have also seen how expensive college is. College has become very expensive, whether our students are going to the University of Illinois or Northwestern or University of Chicago or public universities across this country. College has become way more unaffordable. So we need to make sure that we bring down the cost of college as well. As someone who went to college as a first-generation student, I went to Yale University for college, and that was very expensive as well. And what helped me throughout college was having student loans, having part-time jobs, work-study jobs that was provided by the federal government, and also having scholarships. So we need to really make sure that we expand on access to our students, whether that is Pell Grants that I receive. I receive federal Pell Grants at the national level when I went to Yale. We need to make those Pell Grants accessible for our Korean American students and our Korean American families. We need to make sure that student loans are going to be at low interest rates for our Korean American students and for our Korean American families and our Asian American families. We need to also make sure that scholarships are accessible as well for our students, so that they don't have to pay back those scholarships once they attend college and graduate from college. And I think what also needs to happen is we also need to make sure that when our students graduate from our colleges and our universities, that they have a job for them, that when they graduate, that they're able to enter the workforce and they have a job prepared for them. And these are good paying jobs as well, whether that is in technology or in infrastructure or innovation or finance or community or nonprofits or government jobs. We need to make sure that those jobs are accessible for them. And we also need to make sure that there is a solid public service forgiveness program as well, of which when students do dedicate their careers to public service, that they're also able to get those student loans forgiven as well. And so we need to provide more resources to these existing programs, but we also need to make sure that any cuts that are happening right now at the Department of Education are not going to happen, and that we need to provide more resources as well to the Department of Education and provide more resources into the public education, K-12, and into higher education as well, particularly public universities for our Korean American students.
시카고와 그 주변 지역의 주택 가격이 계속해서 상승하고 있는데요. 주택 가격 부담을 줄이기 위해 어떤 연방 정책을 지지하시겠습니까?
Yeah, so housing costs right now has become way unaffordable. It's become way too expensive across the Chicagoland area. My proposal is making sure that we find resources to bring down your property taxes, bring down your housing costs. And what I propose is, again, if we take 1/5 of 1 penny on every financial transaction that these multi-billion-dollar hedge funds have made in this current economy, we can find $800 billion extra across the federal government, and we can then use that money to reduce your housing costs, reduce your property taxes, reduce your housing costs. What we also need to do is also explore, provide more resources into HUD as well. This is the Department of Housing and Urban Development at the federal level. We have seen right now it is becoming way too expensive to buy a home as a first-time homeowner. We saw during the pandemic in 2020 where the interest rates to buy a house was 3% or even lower. I think we need to bring down those interest rates right now. Right now, the interest rate is about 7% or 8% or even higher. So we need to work with the Federal Reserve and HUD to bring down those interest rates, to reduce them, to make it much more affordable for our families to buy a house for the first time. I think we also need to look at the ways in which rent has gone up these last several years, where rent has gone up, $500, $1,000 in our communities, particularly in our Asian American communities and communities of color. We need to bring down those rent prices, and what we have seen right now that has happened as a trend is that hedge fund companies, private equity companies like Blackstone and BlackRock, they come into our communities. They come into Skokie or Glenview or Morton Grove or Buffalo Grove, and they buy up all the real estate in our communities. And then when they buy up these real estate, they don't live in our neighborhoods. They then increase the rent prices to go up. They inflate the prices artificially. So what we need to also do is regulate when these private equity companies come into our neighborhoods and buy up our properties and then try to inflate the prices for our neighbors and for our communities of color and for our seniors. We need to regulate them in a way where they cannot do that. We also need to regulate them in a way where they cannot buy up all this land without actually making any investments in our communities as well. So that is a way for us to also make sure that we keep rent prices stable, that we stabilize rent prices, that we bring those rent prices down, that we bring down the cost of property taxes and the cost of housing. And what I am also proposing from HUD itself, from the Housing and Urban Development Department, is also make sure that we build more affordable housing units and that we build more supply across this country as well and across our district. We have an affordability crisis right now when it comes to housing. We need to build more housing units. We also need to build more affordable housing units where housing costs should not be $1 million for each family. If we can find the middle ground and the middle supply where it is $500,000 or even less, that $250,000 range for families that are trying to buy their first home, that is the range that we should be looking for when we're looking at the income levels of middle-class families that are only making $50,000 a year to $100,000 a year. We need to make sure that they can buy a home that is affordable for them. And so my proposal is also build more homes that are in the $250,000 to $500,000 range, which allows for our middle-class families and our working-class families to be able to buy a home. And the last thing that I would propose is bringing down the percentage of down payments. Right now, when you buy a home for the first time, your down payment is 20%. That is very high. If you think about that, if you're buying a $500,000 home, a $500,000 home, your down payment is $100,000 right now. So what I am also proposing is we need to provide more initiatives within HUD. And what I'm proposing is if we can bring down that down payment to 3%, 5%, and provide more resources where the federal government can provide you with supporting your down payment costs, that allows for our family to only make a 3% down payment, a 5% down payment on a home. That's going to be way more affordable. That's going to be a real life support for our families to buy their first home. And the federal government can do its part as well to provide the extra 15% when it comes to down payment. And so we've seen these programs work at the federal level in HUD, but we need to provide more resources and we need to expand these programs so that it can reach our Korean American communities and our Asian American communities as well.
연방정부는 보육비, 공과금, 교통비 등 일상적인 생활비로 어려움을 겪는 근로 가정들을 지원하는데 어떤 역할을 해야 할까요?
Yeah, I believe the federal government has a huge role to play when it comes to helping our working families and our middle-class families who are currently struggling right now with childcare costs, utility costs, transportation costs. I think certainly at the federal level, and even right now at the local level, we're seeing childcare costs increase. It's becoming very expensive. And I've talked to families across this district where childcare could cost $3,000, $4,000 a month. That is unsustainable for our community. So what I am proposing is making sure that we expand and fight for a child care tax credit that allows for folks who are able to then receive that tax credit when they file their taxes so that they're able to receive the money back, so that child care coverage is accessible for our communities, that we bring down the cost of childcare and we reduce the burden of childcare. I think certainly for utilities as well, we have seen a monopoly when it comes to utility costs across our state from certain providers. And so we need to bring those costs down. And I think what we're seeing right now is also big technology companies that are using AI, that are also building these data centers across our communities. And they're not paying for the extra utility costs, right? They're not paying for the extra usage of water. And so we've seen that inflated price come to our consumers, come to our neighbors, come to our families. And so we need to also rein that in as well and make sure that we're able to bring those costs down. And then for transit, again, my proposal is if we take 1/5 of 1 penny, 1/5 of 1 penny on every financial transaction that happens from these multi-billion-dollar hedge funds, we can find $800 billion extra over the course of 10 years. And we can then use that money, and even in the first year, that's $80 billion extra for us to then use that money to bring down your costs of transit. That allows for us to then reduce the cost of transportation, reduce the cost of toll fares, reduce the cost of transit fares when you're using the subway or the metro. That allows for us to bring those costs down so that families can then save for the future and that they're able to be sustainable long term and that they're able to get by on a monthly basis as well.
현상 유지에 도전하고 직업 정치인에 맞서는 것에 대해 말씀하셨는데요. 실제로 그것은 어떤 걸 의미하나요?
I think right now Americans are tired of the status quo. What happens with the status quo is you have career politicians who've been there for 30, 40, 50 years and nothing gets done. People are fighting. They're bickering from both sides of the spectrum, right? Whether you're far left or far right. And folks are not working for solutions for the American people. And I think it's very important that we have someone who did not come from the status quo, who is not a career politician. And I can tell you this, when I first ran for state representative in 2021, I resigned from my job in community investments to do so. My mom said that I was crazy for resigning from my job to do that. But I would say this, I felt very compelled to do that because of public service, because of the ways in which this country fought for my family and me to have a fair shot at the American dream. And so I resigned from my job and I spent a whole entire year just campaigning, meeting our neighbors where they're at. And I think what was really important to me was making sure that we don't have someone who came from the political establishment or from the Chicago machine. And I ran against the Chicago machine. I ran against the political establishment in my first race. And we won. We won that year with 91% of the vote in the general election. That was the highest statewide for a general election with an opponent. My mom said that 91% was an A-. And I think what was really important to me was making sure that we get there to support our working families, that we are only held accountable to our neighbors, to our communities. And something that's very important to me is, I view this as public service. These seats do not belong to us. It does not belong to me. It belongs to the American people. It belongs to our 9th Congressional District constituents, right? It belongs to our neighbors. And when we are sent there we're sent there to fight for our neighbors, to bring down your cost of living, to make your life a lot better and a lot easier. And so right now in this moment of time, we don't need more status quo, right? We don't need more career politicians. I think we need someone who is going to be a champion for all of us, someone who did not come from politics, and I did not come from politics, and so that is going to be different. And I think what we need to do when we get to Washington is also we need to make sure we look at solutions, right? We can't just fight when we get there. We need to really make sure that we have solutions and that we can actually bring back benefits for our neighbors and for our Korean American communities and for our Asian American communities as well.
후보님에게 있어 미국의 약속은 어떤 의미이며 다음 세대를 위해 어떻게 그 약속을 지켜나가시겠습니까?
Yeah, so I think back about my own childhood experience. My family and I, who were refugees from Vietnam, my grandparents who died in Vietnam fighting for democracy, my dad who spent 5 years in a prison camp in that war. Every single night that he was tortured and starved, he held on to hope that one day he could live in a country that gave him an opportunity, that gave his kids opportunity to be successful. I think about my mother, who was homeless during the Vietnam War, whose village was burned down, whose father was killed. She and her mother were homeless during the war, and every single night that they survived, they held on to hope. Hope that one day they could live free in a country that gave them an opportunity, that gave their kids an opportunity. And so when we first came to this country, we had nothing. You know, we had no money, no connections, no jobs, no housing, no education. We did not speak English at all, but we had hope in the American promise and hope in the American dream. And I think it was that hope that kept us going every single day, even when we were living low income, working class, 8 of us in a 1-bedroom apartment. And I think what was really important to me was making sure that that American promise that we fought for, that was there for us, that was there for me, that was there for me and my family, is going to be there for the next generation. And so I have been very vocal about making sure that we fight to restore the American promise and the American dream for all of us, right? That no matter where you come from, your zip code, you get a fair shot in this country at the American promise. And that American promise, I believe, is still alive right now, but we need to fight for it. You know, we know that it's slipping away from us right now. We know that the American dream is slipping away from a lot of families. Right now, families are struggling to get by, but we have to bring it back. You know, we have to bring it back, and I believe that that essence, the American promise, is still in each one of us. And I think for me, right now running for United States Congress, we need to make sure that we restore that promise for all of us, and that's something that I intend to do when I get to Washington.
그동안 한인 및 아시아계 커뮤니티와 어떤 방식으로 소통해 오셨고 앞으로 어떻게 협력 관계를 더 강화하고 싶은지 말씀해 주시기 바랍니다.
I love meeting with our Korean American community members. I have been at the forefront of making sure that we fight to bring back resources for our Korean American community. Right now, we are in talks with the Korean American community to bring back resources to build our Korean American Center. In Glenview. I think that's something that's been very important to me, to make sure that we bring back those resources for the Korean American community, to make sure that there is a community space and that there is a community hub where we can support our Korean American small business owners, where we can support our Korean American students, Korean American young people, where we can support our Korean American seniors. And I have been at the forefront of making sure that we bring back resources for our communities as well. So every year in Springfield, I have fought to bring back millions of dollars for our communities, particularly our Asian American communities and our Korean American communities, so that it supports our seniors, that seniors have access to community programming, seniors have access to health care, seniors have access to community events that helps them prosper and thrive and be healthy. We have also brought back resources for our Korean American young people as well, to make sure that they have scholarships and that they are able to pursue higher education, and also they're able to pursue jobs after that as well. So even at the state side, as someone who's been on the Appropriations Committee, we fought to make sure that public education in Illinois is accessible, is free, is very low tuition for our students. And we've also made sure to address small businesses as well. So as someone who is a member of the Small Business Technology and Innovation Committee in Springfield, we've brought to make sure that we support our Korean American small businesses as well, so that we bring down the costs of what it means to do small businesses, what it means to operate a small business in Illinois, and that we support them with additional grants for them, that we support them with grants for either their grocery stores or their restaurants or their beauty salons or whatever it is, that we support them with additional grants. And that's something that I've been at the very forefront of with, is making sure that we support our Korean American communities as much as we can. And I think that's something that's very important to me in the future as well, is making sure that I am always accessible, that whatever the Korean American community needs, that I'm always there, and that I understand what it's like as the only immigrant in this race and the only Asian American in this race who has a pathway to victory. I think we need to make sure, and this district itself is also 20% Asian American. You know, we need to make sure that we have a voice in Washington who's going to fight for us, who's also going to bring back home millions of dollars as well. And we know at the federal level, the budget is over $7 trillion. In the federal budget. That means that there is going to be resources that we want to bring back home to the Korean American community to help the Korean American community prosper and thrive as well.
Okay. 최근 이민세관 집행국 검문 중에 제지를 당하셨다고 말씀하셨는데 당시 상황을 어떻게 처리하셨는지 그리고 선출직 공무원으로서 어떤 생각을 갖고 계신지 말씀 부탁드립니다.
So about 2 months ago, my colleagues and I my staff and I were out making sure that we protect our neighbors, our Asian American neighbors, our Korean American neighbors from ICE overreach. We had a lot of ICE agents in Chicago, in my district on the north side of Chicago, in Uptown. And these ICE agents were going into restaurants, businesses, without a warrant for anyone's arrest, without due process. And they went in and they were trying to grab people who were restaurant owners, who were servers, who were bartenders, who were waitresses, who were chefs in the back, right? And again, these were Korean Americans, Asian Americans, Vietnamese Americans, Chinese Americans, Mexican Americans, whoever. But these ICE agents came in without a judicial warrant, without any due process, and our job as elected officials is to make sure people know about their constitutional rights. That you have the right to remain silent, you have the right to a lawyer, you have the right to due process, you have the right to the United States Constitution. And these rights are afforded by the United States Constitution. And so when I was out in my district protecting our neighbors, particularly our Asian American neighbors, Korean American neighbors from ICE overreach, 6 ICE agents surrounded me and put a gun to my head at 12 p.m. in broad daylight. And in that moment in time, what went through my mind is making sure that we protect our neighbors, that it was very important to me that your safety and your family safety is very important to me, is one of the most important things to me as an elected official. And so it was my job to make sure that we protect our neighbors. And so in that situation, we were accosted by ICE agents. Obviously, once they found out that I was an elected official and that there were cameras that was doing the filming, they pulled the gun away. And then they told us to not interfere with their operations. But what I would tell them is their operations were essentially unconstitutional. Is that you cannot go into anyone's restaurant or anyone's home without a judicial warrant for their arrest, without an actual name that you have, and also without due process. And I think in this country, in the United States of America, we have due process. And so we need to make sure that all of us are protected, and all of us have constitutional rights. And I've been, again, very vocal about that. And it's also very important to me that we address that, right? And I think what we need to also do is make sure that there is a pathway to citizenship. For folks who are undocumented, we need to make sure that they have access to citizenship, right? That we find them a pathway. For the dreamers, of which I know there are also Korean students who are dreamers as well, we need to also find them a pathway to citizenship as well. For our Korean seniors who may need citizenship, we need to find them a pathway to citizenship. And I think for our students, for our Korean students who come over to the United States on H-1B visas or on foreign visa, on student visas, we need to also make sure that when they graduate from our universities, that they can stay in the United States as well. And we need to also make sure that when they do get a job from our companies on an H-1B visa, that visa can also be extended so they can also have a pathway to becoming a U.S. citizen. Because what we need to do is make sure we keep the talent and keep the skill sets in America. We want folks to come here, we want folks to stay here, thrive here, contribute to the economy, contribute to our society, and make sure that the United States is a thriving place for all of us.
3월 17일 선거를 앞두고 유권자들에게 전하고 싶은 메시지가 있다면 말씀해 주시죠.
Absolutely. And I actually would say this from the immigration standpoint as well. I saw what happened in Georgia at the Hyundai plant, and I think it was absolutely horrific that Korean workers were subjected to being put in chains and shackles and then being deported back to South Korea. I thought that was absolutely horrific for us to be doing. I think we need to make sure that there is a pathway to citizenship for all of us, for our Korean American seniors, for our Korean American communities, for our Korean seniors, and for our Korean American young people as well, and for our Korean American community. The one thing I would say is this race is coming down to the wire. And as the only viable Asian American in this race right now, we are very laser focused on bringing down your cost of living. My job is to make sure I bring down your cost of living, whether that is reducing your property taxes, your housing costs, your healthcare costs, your grocery costs, your utility costs. That's my focus, is to bring that cost down and make sure that your life is way more affordable, is way better. My job is also to protect your healthcare, your Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. It's going to be there when you retire, but we need to make sure that we fight to protect Social Security because it's going to be insolvent by 2035. So I have solutions to address that right now, whether it's addressing bringing down your cost of living or addressing protecting your Social Security. And the last thing I would like to say is I have always been a proponent and a friend and an ally of the Korean American community. I have always been at all the events. I have been in talks with the Korean American communities on making sure that we bring back more resources for the community. And I think right now, in this moment of crisis, we need someone who is a young leader, someone who is a new generation of leadership, someone who is really going to make sure that they fight for all of us, who's going to bring back resources and also have tangible solutions that's going to affect your day-to-day life and make your life a lot better. So my job is to protect you and make your life better. My job is to bring down your cost of living, and my job is to make sure that you realize your American dream, that no matter what your zip code you live in, no matter where you come from, that you and your family have access to the American dream, that you realize your American dream through educational opportunities, healthcare opportunities, economic opportunities, and that we're able to help you and your family live the best life possible in this country. And so I ask for your support on March 17. Punch 45 is my punch number on the ballot. You need to scroll down because we're the last name on the ballot, second to last name on the ballot. And with 하원의원, we all win. But it's been an honor to be here today. Thank you so much for your time. 감사합니다. And have a great rest of your day as well. And with 하원의원, we all win. Punch 45. Please visit our website, haonfor9.com, HOANFOR9.com. Thank you so much for your time. 감사합니다.
귀한 말씀 감사합니다. 지금까지 기호 45번 일리노이주 하원의원 후보 호안후윈과 함께한 시간이었습니다. Thank you.
감사합니다.